Welcome everyone to another Truth, Love, Freedom podcast. Today it's an honor to have my mom here with me, aka the Wonder Woman. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, pretty excited about this.
Could you tell me and the viewers a little bit about your life, your inspiration, your role models, and how you got to where you are today?
Wow, we started with a big question. Okay. I would say my grandma was my role model and inspiration. She raised 8 kids and held a job and could do everything, cook and sew and homestead and all of that. She kept it together, so she was my biggest role model.
Could you tell me a little more about your grandmother? Do you have any cool stories about her?
Oh, so Mama Harmon was Mama Harmon to everyone. Every kid that we grew up with, everyone we know. She was kind of an icon in Bridgeton. She had a little sewing shop, so we all had to walk past it on our way home from school when we walked, so we'd have to check in. And she'd snatch us up if we were in trouble or give us a hug if we needed it. She was stern, but she was really, really a nice lady who kept an eye on all of us. I remember her setting more than one kid down on her stoop and making them sit there until they could behave, and then they'd have to explain why they went home late.
When you were growing up, did you spend a lot of time with your grandmother and at your grandma's house?
I didn't spend a lot of time at her house, but I spent a lot of time with her. She ran my 4-H, which was waste not, want not when I was little. And then as I got older, she did a sewing 4-H. She sewed my prom dresses for me. I would go help her can and organize her house, but mostly she'd come and pick us up and take us places. She would take us to her church youth group and her church Sunday school and things like that.
She was a real leader within the community.
She was. She was well known by everybody and loved by most everybody. She could be a little hard-headed and she could be a little stern, but yeah, she was an icon in the neighborhood. Everybody knew her.
When she got older, what happened? Did anyone step up and take care of her?
Uh, she was really hesitant to leave her house. She stayed in her house until her late 80s, which she should have moved out sooner. But when she lost her house, she moved in with us for 8 years, which was pretty awesome for my kids to get to see her firsthand. You know, you visit somebody here and there and you don't get to know them, but living with her, they really got to know her good. She had dementia, so she was in and out, but it was a great experience.
It's a beautiful thing to be taken care of by someone your whole life and then have the honor to then take care of them.
Absolutely. We had a good time. You know, we would talk about old times. She'd still teach me stuff even though I was grown. She'd go to the park with his kids and things like that. So it really was an honor to have her. And everybody always said I did a good job, but I truly believe she made a difference. She really made it home.
Could you tell me and the viewers a little bit about the jobs you've had over the years?
So I've had a lot of jobs. I don't really stay at jobs long. When I was really young, I waited tables for a while. Then I got my EMT cert, and I did that for about 8 years on ambulance, and then I worked at Wheaton's Glass House, and that's actually where I met your dad. I was a firefighter for a couple years, and then I got into behavioral therapy, which is what I do now, and I absolutely love it, working with autistic kids and trying to teach them basic life skills.
What draws you to help other people?
I would say it's a small wins. With my kids, the kids I work with, both of them were nonverbal when I started with them, and now they have a couple words and a couple signs, and that's huge. Going from not talking to being able to say what you want. I tell stories all the time about the little boy that I have because he was nonverbal, and we really didn't think he was on the right age level. So they told us he was like 18 months, but he was in second grade. And as soon as he got an AAC device, which is a iPad for communication, it just has pictures and he can say what he wants, we found out he was funny. Like, he was cracking jokes all the time and learned how to ask for things and be assertive. It really changed his life. And that's kind of why I do it. You see that little wins, him going from not being able to say anything and being in a diaper to becoming fully potty trained and having a sense of humor. It's amazing.
Do you feel like you get rewarded spiritually for doing good to other people and being a kind person?
I do. Actually, something my grandma said when I was really little always stays with me. Every time you do something good, you will get a gold brick in heaven to build to your house, so you're getting in heaven. But if you get your acknowledgement on earth, you don't get your brick in heaven. And I'm sure she probably said that to me in passing, not realizing that it's really directed my life. I think about that. You know, you see a lot of podcasts, you see a lot of people doing this great things, but they're doing it on camera. And I kind of feel like if you're feeding the homeless doesn't want to be on camera. They just want their food. So if you're getting your recognition here, you might not be getting it in heaven. And that's kind of not worth it. I'd much rather have a good place in heaven than have people proud of me for doing what everybody should be doing.
Amen. Why don't you think more people take this route and help other people in their lives?
It's hard and it's exhausting. You know, I talked about the little boy I seen when I first met him. He was biting and scratching and just in a diaper. He was really hard to work with. And you have to put a lot of time into it. You know, it's the same with raising kids. You put a lot of messy, dirty time when they're little, you know, in hopes that you're raising a good person. But I think a lot of people don't stay vested. They do it for the moment of glory or moment of recognition, and then they realize how much work it is, and they're not interested.
Is it ever sad hearing those stories within your work?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking because if you could just stick it out for another 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you don't know what a difference you'll make. Like I said, I mean, I hate to keep talking about the little boy, but you know, he's not in diapers anymore. He's talking to his parents instead of biting and scratching. He can tell them what he wants to eat or what hurts or where he wants to go. So that's pretty rewarding. That's long term help for not just the kid, but the family.
How do you stay so positive and not give up on humanity?
It's the little wins. You know, you could be hating life and everything could be so difficult and miserable, and then you just see something little. You know, at the school I work with, it's a bunch of behavior problems and they're exhausting and you don't want to do it, but then you see like someone be kind to someone else or somebody, you know, be super excited to have lunch, and how can you not be driven to do that more?
What are some things that we are missing in the world today?
Compassion. Compassion is probably the biggest one. We all see the videos of people videotaping fights breaking out or people getting hurt, people getting mugged, and everybody's standing there watching. And I can't imagine for that family to see the video later of what actually happened and to know that people just stood there and they just watched it happen. Like, I don't know, you have to have compassion. One of the things I say all the time to myself is that could be my mom or that could be my kids. I tend to be a fast driver and I pass people, which probably isn't a good trait, but I never thought about it until you kids started driving. And then it dawned on me, like, you know, I'm tailgating or passing some 17-year-old kid who's probably scared to death to be going 40 miles an hour, and I just made it worse. So I think if you can relate in any way, it changes your perspective.
What was the hardest job you've had so far?
I would probably say the behavioral technician. Like, it's the most rewarding and it's great, but it's horrible. Like, you know, some of these kids don't have great home lives, so you're working with them for 3-4 hours a day, and, you know, you're helping them, even just simple potty training or helping them use their manners and things like that, and then they go back to a house that is chaos or they don't follow the rules, and you feel like all that work was lost. That's devastating.
How hard of a job is it to be a mom?
I would say that's the hardest job. You know, it's a cliche and everybody says, you know, there's no instruction book or you're not trained for it, but every kid is so different, drastically different, that it's not even like you can learn by your second or third kid. It's a continuously learning thing. It changes constantly.
Which does lead into my next question. Once you become a mother, do you ever stop?
No, no, I don't think you are. And I think that a lot of people are nurturing way before their moms. As you know, my little brother was a little sick as a kid, and I am super, super overseeing of him sometimes. I'm always making sure he's eating right. I'm always mothering him, you know. I feel like he was the first person I ever took care of, so even in his 40s, I feel the need to do it. And the same with other people's kids. You know, people come over and you know they don't have a home-cooked meal. You want to mother them and feed them and make sure they have a few minutes of the mothering they deserve.
How do you know you're doing a good job as a parent?
You never do. You never, ever do. Because honestly, even your kid's success, you know, I didn't go to college. 2 of you boys went to college and graduate, which is absolutely amazing. Like, I don't even know how to put that into words. But you still worry every time you guys drive at night by yourself. I worry every time you go into town. You never know if you do a good job. You just hope for the best.
How do you balance your personal life with also being a mother?
I think that took me a really long time to learn. Like, it was after these kids were grown, it took me to learn, but you have to take time for yourself. Whether I like to read, so whether it's a book or going out with your friends or any of that kind of stuff, you really do need a night off to reset, even if it's just sitting alone in your room. Like, there's no shame in taking some me time if you need it. It's better to take that time, 2 hours alone by yourself or with your friends, than coming and being screaming at your kids or unhappy or miserable. So,
Does being a mother make you appreciate your mother more?
absolutely. Absolutely it does. Me and my parents didn't get along great. We didn't speak to each other for a couple years. But right after I had Jesse, my oldest, I kind of went back. You got to kind of forgive people, you know? It's a different time, a different age. They were learning just as much as I was, so you have to move forward. And they're both amazing grandparents.
What advice would you give to people having kids at the age between 17 and 19?
Don't listen to other people. Your life is not over. Should you get pregnant that young? No. You really shouldn't. There's so much out there. But me personally, I was floating around not doing anything great or meaningful. And when I got pregnant, it was a newsflash. Like, I realized, like, it's time to get a job that pays better. It's time to get an apartment. It's time to get my life together, because I have someone depending on me that didn't ask to be born in low income, or, you know, to a teen mom. So it is absolutely doable. Find yourself a strong foundation, whether that's your family or the family you choose, and go from there. You can do it. I was really blessed by a lot of people along the way that I didn't even know.
Are there any other things in this life that you only realize once you have a kid?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Like, you understand your parents a little bit better and your grandparents. You understand how short time is and how easy it is to make little mistakes. You kind of, I think you become more compassionate and more sensitive and more caring because you realize how hard it is.
Do you think the world is missing community right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up in a neighborhood, I want to say there was probably 25 of us kids, and we just ran the streets. Not in the bad way that people run the streets now, but we would just leave Saturday morning on our bikes or skateboards, and we would just go from parking lot to parking lot just playing, and we'd end up in somebody's backyard, and the parents would either give us fruit snacks or water or something, but nobody even questioned. Like, we really just ran from one yard to the other. You know, if we were acting up, neighbors would yell at us or call our parents. But I think your generation really missed out on that just crazy free playing. I can't even tell you what we did for hours outside, but it was a lot of make-believe and games, and we were all one big cluster. I say it all the time, that the kids that I grew up with, we had Spanish kids and black kids and Asian kids. It wasn't really, race was not an option back then. Like, they were your neighborhood kids, and that's who you played with. Like, it didn't matter.
Do you believe it takes a community / a village to raise a kid?
Absolutely. You can't do it alone, especially if you're going to be a working mom or, you know, any of that stuff. I was really lucky when I moved into my first trailer. The neighbors across the street had recently had their mother-in-law pass away, so they gave me towels and blankets and things like that, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but as a young parent, that stuff costs money. I wouldn't have been able to get all of that stuff the first time I moved into the house. So that sense of community to people I didn't even know got me on my feet, you know, helped me out a lot.
You mentioned a good foundation earlier. Do kids turn out into better adults when they are born with a solid foundation?
Absolutely, 100%. If you are not worrying about being hungry or being scared or any of them things, you can just learn so much, you know, just be able to see the world differently, be able to have experiences and do stuff. But if you're just worried about where you're going to eat, or you know, being scared to get in trouble, you're not going to learn as much.
How much of a problem are drugs in the world today?
I think they're horrible. They're probably worse than they've ever been. Perfect example: New Jersey legalized marijuana, which I'm not really against, to each their own. But we did a Christmas parade, and I actually had to text the parents and apologize because it smelled so strong. I knew their kids were coming home with that smell on them, and I didn't want the parents to think the kids were up to no good. So I think legalizing it made it less hidden, and now it's everywhere you go. For my job, I can be drug tested, and that's really a big concern for me. When I go places and I smell so much of it, I don't want to, you know, be caught up in that. And then I think with pain pills and things like that, it starts out small. Everybody's looking for a little relaxation or release from pain or stress, and it's an easy out, and they're affordable.
Why is everyone using these unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with their stress?
Because nobody's taught how to deal with their stress. Nobody's taught to find interests that like them. You know, kids today have computers and TVs and phones, so they're tied up to other people all day long. Like, they have no alone time. And then a lot of society can't be alone. They don't know how to entertain themselves. You know, I was brought up in a generation, I didn't have computers, I didn't have phones until I was old, so I love reading. I could read for hours a day. That's my escape. That's my mental reset. And I don't think a lot of people have something that resets them.
Do you think people nowadays are hypnotized by death?
Wow, that's a good question. Define hypnotized.
People are more attracted to death nowadays than they were in the past.
Yeah, I would have to agree, but I also think people have more idle time. You know, when you didn't have all the appliances we have, even vacuuming, for example. You know, vacuuming takes 15 minutes a day, but it's something that you need to put your thought into and you're doing it. But if you have a Roomba, that's 15 minutes you're not doing. You know, you're not out gardening, you're not doing things that distract you, so you have so much time to think about the bad things. You're not getting away from the bad things. You know, if you have a bad day at school, you're coming home, you're playing on your phone, you have nothing to focus your attention to, you just dwell on that. And that's easy to spiral. Where if you had chores or a favorite activity or you were busy with your kids, you could be distracted for a little bit.
Do you see it as a danger to the youth if they care less about their lives than they are attracted to death?
Absolutely. And that's also why like teen suicide is so high and you know, mass shooters and things like that. Like that stuff didn't really cross our minds in our generation. You know, if you were bored or unhappy, you would go do something. But I think we didn't have the TV, we didn't have the phones, we didn't have that. So we made our own atmosphere or community or whatever you want to call it. But if you were unhappy, you would go find your friends and listen to music with them or just go sit at their house. And I think that our society is missing a big social aspect. I love being home more than anyone else, but it's important to get out there and be around other people to see how grateful you have it and it's not as bad as you thought. And you know, death isn't the answer, or sitting alone is not the answer. You need to get out there and do something, occupy your mind.
Would you say country's leaders they care about the future of this country and the future generations, or would you say they only care about what happens within their lifetime?
That's a good question. I think because our presidential choices are so much older than they used to be, their perspective is very, very different. If they had just had kids or they were in their 40s and 50s, their perspective would be different and they would be able to care more. But when you get to 80 years old and you're, you know, a millionaire or have money, your concerns are very different and it's hard to be a peer to the public or understand what they're going through. So yes, I do think that they're kind of short-minded or short-term looking at their problems. We need to be looking at our grandchildren at all times. You know, our children are already raised and there's not a whole lot we can do to direct them or guide them. For me personally, that's the generation I'm in. But it's time to look at what you want to provide for your grandkids, what you want to provide for your great grandkids. And I don't think they're looking that far ahead.
Whether it comes to community or your personal life, would you say it's important to have a 10-year plan, to have long-term ideas and policies to benefit your future?
Absolutely. I think 10 years is a lot when you're in your 20s and 30s because it's such a big age gap. I don't think you can go that far then. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. But I think now, and you know, I'm coming up on my 50s, it's time to start looking long term. I don't want to be working my whole life. I don't want to be struggling. I'd like to be set and be able to take care of my grandkids while, you know, you guys work if that's an option, or be able to go do whatever needs to be done. If you need something at the drop of the hat, I'd like to be retired and be able to fill that. I'd like to be able to travel and things, and that stuff just doesn't happen magically. You have to put the work in and save and things when you're this age.
Do you set goals in your life?
I do, not as much as I should, but I try to constantly have something. And I think goals sounds daunting to me personally. It sounds like a lot, so I do list. You know, this is what I have to get done this weekend. This is what I have to get done this week. This is what I have to get done this month. And by next summer, I want to be here. And for me, a list isn't as big of a job. It's not a goal. It's not somewhere I have to be. It's just like, oh, I'll do these things. But by doing your goal, by doing your checklist little by little, you're working towards your goal. So you have to have a goal in mind.
Why don't more people make lists and plan out ahead of time?
I think people think they got it. Like they think they understand it. I love lists. I have lists for everything. I love the glory or the satisfaction of putting a check mark. Sometimes I'll put something dumb on my list, like make your bed, just so I can check it off and already have one done. I don't know. I think lists are very, very empowering. If you're, you know, not happy with your job, not happy with your life, and you're like, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to have a better job. I'm going to have a better house. I'm going to have all these things. That's heavy. That's a lot of pressure. But if you have a list saying, I'm going to do 3 interviews, I'm going to get a job in a month, that's easily obtainable. I think people are just too busy to make a list, or they think they have it. They don't think they need it.
How do you feel towards our country's military?
The biggest thing is grateful. Like, where would we be without them? These young men and women are giving up so much to take care of us, to fight for us. So, yeah, grateful would be the biggest one.
Would you like to tell the people a little bit about Civil Air Patrol?
Sure. So, Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the Air Force. It is a nonprofit organization focusing on cadets, the youth. It's training today's youth to be tomorrow's leaders. All three of my kids are in Civil Air Patrol, and we've gotten so much out of it. It's so much more than just a club. The military pays for them to take flights, so you get to fly. And for people in our community, I mean, I didn't fly until I was an adult. It's not something you get to do, so that's kind of cool. The opportunities it gives you. You get to go to base and tour things. You learn so much about leadership and integrity and honor, things that we're not really getting in today's society.
Why is it so important to keep the youth busy and productive?
Because they're always looking for something to do. They're looking for entertainment, and they're going to find it. So if you're taking them to a parade or a color guard or even an amusement park, they're going to find it there. But if you're leaving them home with nothing to do, they're still going to find it. And that may be, breaking into an abandoned building or spray painting something. And to a kid, a youth, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Nobody was using the building. I mean, I honestly remember doing it as a kid. They don't realize what could happen or how fast things can turn.
Did you ever worry about losing one of your sons or one of your sons falling victim to the street life?
Always. I think that's a constant concern for everybody, but especially being right outside of Bridgeton and Millville. It's so easy for them to make friends with the wrong person or the need to be connected to somebody and take the wrong spot. I mean, I'm an adult that grew up in Bridgeton. I made some bad choices, and I'm just really lucky that it didn't turn out bad for me. I think that's the scariest thing. It only takes a moment or two for something bad to happen. They may not even have bad intentions. I actually wanted these guys to go into the military and get away from Cumberland County to see there's so much more out there.
What do you do to keep such a positive outlook and always strive to be a positive role model?
So I work on that every day. That's actually on my list, to be positive, because I don't think it comes naturally to me. But I did have a lot of role models growing up. I was really lucky to see a lot of different aspects. Like I said, my mom took me to the church, and I was her sewing buddy, so we actually visited people's houses while she sewed things for them or altered things. So I got to meet a lot of older people and people who had their life together. And it was a big reflection, being a kid growing up in Bridgeton, you didn't really see a lot of nice stuff. So you go to people's houses and they have nice things, they have nice clothes. You start to think, like, I could do that. Like, that is obtainable for me.
If you had one last message to give to the youth, what would you tell them?
Honestly, be yourself. I know that sounds stupid and I would not have listened to it when I was 17 years old, but really that's the biggest one. If you're being true to yourself, you'll do good, like no matter what you set out for. If you're trying to hang with a group and you're acting like them, then that's not you, and you just really need to be true to yourself. Find what makes you happy and pursue it. Whether it's reading or drawing or writing, anything. It doesn't even have to be a money-making thing. Just find what brings you happiness and then share that with someone else.
Thank you so much for doing the podcast with me, Wonder Woman.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
I love you, Mom.
I love you too, buddy.